What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and it's time for League of Legends patch 11.8, which is going live on, well, probably April 14th for most people, which means 11.9 would be April 28th. And based on my understanding of the midseason invitational schedule, that should allow 11.9 to be the MSI patch. I believe that's accurate. If not, it's this one. Either way, this one does have some pro-focused nerfs, and let's get into it. I think this is a reasonably interesting patch. It's not huge, I don't think, but it does have some good pro play effects, so let's talk about it. Alrighty. Nerfs to Orianna, Thresh, and Gnar because of pro play. Nerfs to Annie because of skilled players, and nerfs to Yorick because he's OP for lower to average skilled players, and then a bunch of buffs, which is nice. I don't think all these buffs are needed, but some of this, because we are in a pro-focused patch in that we are heading towards MSI, it's like, hey, this is the last time Riot gets to make risky changes in terms of like buffing things that might be too good, or any sort of like rework-sized things. Because you don't want to do that the instant patch before MSI, right? You want the patch to respond to like, oh, this went too well or this went too poorly. Let's change something about it. Also changes to Dr. Mundo and Rumble. To be clear, Rumble is strictly buffed in... you'd have to be really contrived to find a way for this to be a nerf. So Rumble is actually a buff. Dr. Mundo is... actually an adjustment. It's a buff and a nerf. Okay, let's talk about the fact also that Rocket Belt is getting changed. Ionian Boots are getting nerfed. Titanic Hydra is getting nerfed. Shirelius is arguably buffed. Moonstone is weaker. Flowing Water Staff is weaker, probably. Frozen Heart buffs. Putrefier changes / nerfs. It's changes. And skins. Okay, so Gwen's coming out. That's awesome. Check out the Champion Spotlight when it comes out. Let's talk about Annie. Annie has definitely been taking over solo queue, high yellow solo queue, at least moderately high yellow solo queue, the kind of level I play at. And basically, yeah, ever since Riot changed her E to be just here's always move speed and a flat shield, she's been good. I assume she probably had some level of wins with the item changes and whatnot, but we even saw in the LCS final, in the midseason showdown as it's called, Jensen picked Annie even though it was a bad matchup. He's like, yeah, I don't really beat Lucian, but it's okay. I just need to combo people in the back line. It's like, yep, turns out Rocket Belt Tibbers deletes carries. And okay, sure, like Annie is a sort of fixed range, no mobility mage, right? She has a move speed buff. That's not the same, right? Zero 3 just from farther away. Echo has dashes and other tools. Like Annie kind of needs straightforward damage. She's actually a garbage champion. So I'm glad they're not nerfing Annie's damage output. That said, they're nerfing ranks 1 through 4s of Incinerate's mana cost. So in prep for this patch rundown, like the previous one, I looked up win rate data when relevant. I looked up pro presence when relevant. So the win rate data is from 11.7 Plat plus solo queue. The pro presence is from 11.6, top 3 regions only, since LCS was not on 11.6. So it's just LEC, LCK, and LPL. Now that has its own biases, sure, but it's good enough. And again, there literally isn't 11.7 pro play. And so Riot can only look at 11.6 pro play and be pretty sure they got it right based on what they saw. So yeah, reasonable. Okay, so the one thing I'll say before we go into win rates is based on how the website I'm using it measures win rates, which is lawlytics.com, there is win rate inflation. So for all these win rates, the baseline win rate is 51.1%. So if you subtract 1.1% from the number I read off, that's their actual win rate, accounting for biases. In general, that's true. There can be further biases like, oh yeah, Annie's played more in Plat 4 games. We're going to move on. So anyway, Annie was like 3.3% win rate over baseline. So she was doing really, 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 really well. A 3% win rate lift is a lot for picking a champion, just picking a champion. Of note, although the sample is not gigantic, it's big enough for me to be confident in it. WMAX first is actually the optimal Annie skill order. I know Incinerate costs a lot of mana. It goes up to 110. But considering you can just do things like Ludens or build a tier, obviously you usually go Rocket Belt, sure. That just the extra ability to wave clear to shove a wave and get out is actually pretty relevant because you're going to last it with your Q anyway. It's not hard regardless, but maxing W gives you the ability to actually shove a wave a bit faster and maybe cast W twice and the wave's gone. Or, W once, then all the casts are in auto attack range or whatever. Like, if you're going to cast W once, you might as well cast a high rank one and then, the mini wave melts. So there's a real good chance you should probably just consider maxing W first. And in fact, this change here, which increases the cost of lower ranks of W, further incentivizes maxing W first. The mana cost penalty is less severe since you're already going to pay at least 90 mana for it regardless. So here is the mana cost table, though, assuming the most common build, which is maxing Q first. You're going to feel this mana cost nerf for a while. The first 12 levels is a lot. Considering Annie typically doesn't build mana mythics, a mana-focused nerf is going to do quite a bit here. I'm generally a fan of this. I think this is a good nerf. Again, I think Annie kind of needs, and as the marksman that gets bursted by Annie, I'm the target here, but yeah, I think this is a reasonable nerf to Annie. Not nerfing her damage, but nerfing her mana costs, trying to, weaken her landing phase a little bit, I think is fine. Next up is Aphelios. Aphelios is not really getting played in Pro. His Pro presence in 11.6 was 12%, which means he was there. So Aphelios doesn't need very large nerfs for Pro presence. There aren't any bot laner nerfs in this patch. I think the 11.6 AD carry meta has been fine. So I don't think Riot's going to do much more to kind of change that around. But yeah, his solo Q win rate is absolute trash. It's like almost 5% below the baseline win rate. That is very, very, very poor. That said, there is Aphelios tech that is slowly gaining footing, but people aren't doing it yet, which is max W on Aphelios. The way Aphelios works if you don't play Aphelios much is his skills, his active skills rank up automatically. Instead, he ranks Q, W, and E every level, which gives him flat attack damage, flat attack speed, or lethality. As we can see here, the lethality, which is the E, is getting buffed. But the actual high win rate builds for Aphelios is to either do 3 points Q and then just max W instantly, or just max W whenever possible and just like put your secondary points into Q when you can't max W. For several months, every single patch I've looked at it, W max is correct on Aphelios. Now, Aphelios is still not going to be all that good for most players. I assume for experts they're fine, but you're not going to max E. Like, lethality scaling isn't worth it. We'll get into that in a second. But if you want some Aphelios win rate, max W. It is stronger. 3 points Q is up to your choice. It can be useful, but it's not mandatory. It's fine. But max W, max the attack speed. It is the better skill order. Just do it. So lethality is getting buffed. You're not going to listen to level 13. Realistically, the win rates are not close at all for Emax first or second. So there's no way getting like 3 more lethality is going to flip that. You should still max E last. This is purely a late game buff to Aphelios. It's going to help his tank damage a little bit by, lowering their armor by 1.2 or 3 or whatever. Sorry, hiccups. That's going to be fun for this video. It's going to matter more when he's like dueling another, a Rise or something at level 16 in a side lane. Like, that's when it's going to do anything. But this is really, really, really small. This is a very, very small change. The bigger one is the fact that you're getting 10 flat damage off the Q and 25 flat healing. Or not off the Q, off the ult, 10 flat damage at the Calibrum, 25 flat healing, 10th of a second of a root. These are all really, really minor. I mean, if Aphelios' win rate, the funny thing is it might go down because people are going to try lethality max and it's going to be trash. But, these are technically buffs. Aphelios, again, these aren't very big nerfs, so it's kind of whatever. Or very big buffs, so it's kind of whatever. But here, by the way, is the data table. So this is taking, I believe, the... So what this is, there's a bunch of data in the background that's not on the screen. But, the first 12 levels, again, we don't rank E, so it doesn't matter. This is taking the median armor value of a champion, I believe, which is 29 plus 3.5. I think I actually did 30 plus 3.5 just to be rounded numbers. But I took the median armor value of a champion and just threw that in as our example target. And assume they're the same levels of failures because I'm not going to deal any more than this. And then looking at, old and new skill rank ups, I said, okay, what is the damage amp of the E, right? How much more damage am I getting out of the lethality? And it was 2 to 10% in the late game against an average middle target without modus armor, became 2 to 12%, which is, here's the differential in actual, percent DPS gain, right? So again, the ult does sometimes 10 more damage when you have more healing or gives you one more chakram. Like those can be valuable. But, a level 15 Aphelios does 0.8% more damage now that he has 1.5 more lethality. Again, this is not an inspiring list of buffs. This could have been 4 to, 24, and it would have still been, nowhere close to good enough. I know one thing, they did this on purpose, right? The E rank up, I believe, used to be, maybe I'm actually trolling here, used to be percent armor pen, and it was like, okay, well, Aphelios is too good of a tank buster, so let's just give it lethality instead, so he's a bit more general, and like, maybe he'll make different skill ups, and he doesn't. Realistically, they could buff this really, really heavily, maybe like 5 per rank, would get it comparable to like actually be a choice. They really could have gone harder. That said, they don't want Aphelios to take over pro play, so I get them going light. But like post MSI, I would love a follow up to make this like remotely close. Because Aphelios clearly has the win rate to gain, right? Just a thought. All right, let's move on. Cassiopeia is getting 0 to 8 mana off of Twin Fang. This is one thing that I whined about before when talking about champions' mana pools. If you want a champion to have really good mana cost late game, just do something like this instead. Now, it doesn't really matter because Seraph's is, I believe, like bonus mana scaling anyway. I could be wrong about that one. I think Mana Mune is total mana and Seraph's is bonus mana. If I'm backwards, whatever. Either way, right? Like the ability to choose bonus mana as your stat, as your scaling stat on items like Seraph's and like Mana Mune, means it doesn't have to matter what the champion's base mana pool is. It just makes tier comparatively weaker on them. I don't want to get into that again. Ultimately, whatever. But I am a fan of, hey, use your tuning levers, the obvious ones, to do things you want to do, which is, hey, Cassiopeia, she does need a strict mana cost on early ranks of E, by the way, in the early game. Because if she's allowed to play Lady Phase like, I pick Corrupting Potion, I just hit E on cooldown, chases your tower with Conqueror on, I guess I win, ha ha ha. Like, that's not good gameplay. It's not a skill shot. It out DPSs everything else in the game. Like, Twin Fang is only fair if it has a mana cost. This is how, by the way, targeted abilities work. Targeted abilities are only fair if they have mana costs that matter or their range limitations matter. Well, guess what? Twin Fang's range is very good. Its cooldown is very good, so it's never like down for something. So unless the mana cost matters, it doesn't matter. So Cassiopeia is doing very, very, very slightly below average. She's like 0.5%, if even that, win rate below baseline for mid lane. She has 1% pro presence. So to be fair, she is not seen in pro, and she is slightly weak in solo queue, which is like, okay, that's a reasonable buff target. And again, I think Riot is trying to add some more spice to the mid lane, right? They're taking champions that have been pro play before, right? Cassiopeia has been a big pro mid laner before, and saying, hey, let's add this one back in, Cassiopeia. Let's put her in the mix. And yeah, I don't see why she shouldn't be. This is actually a pretty good buff. Right? You're going to feel some of the mana costs pretty early on, level 3 and 5. It's pretty meaningful. But yeah, so mana cost buff feels good. No complaints here. The one last thing I'll say, and this is actually paraphrasing the designer himself who made this change, is it can be very hard to know how much a mana cost change matters. These things can look really underwhelming and just mean the absolute world. I know we had one with Annie earlier. We have one with Cassiopeia here. This kind of stuff can be a really, really, really big deal, and it can also mean nothing. And it's just not really possible to know, but we'll see somewhere between like a 0.5 and like a 2.5% win rate lift here. I couldn't tell you either. I think it's a pretty decent buff though. I'd guess northwards of 1%. So next up is Dr. Mundo. So this is something interesting, and I've talked about it before, and I actually like that Riot does this. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Basically, Riot, and we're going to see this with Rumble as well, Riot wants to cater to champion mains. Like, Dr. Mundo is 11 years old in, bit dates, right? Like, he's been in the game for 11 years. At a certain point, the Dr. Mundo players, right? Anyone else who comes on are just doing it because like he's strong, and so they're bandwagoning on. But like, established Dr. Mundo players are who Dr. Mundo buffs are for, right? Like the audience has been established. The same is true for Rumble, and the same is true for like Zach, etc. Like, I mean, there's a bunch of champions that have been out for long enough that like we know their audience, they know their audience, like the players know that they like the champion. And Mundo players, generally speaking, were top laners. They were top lane Mundo players. And the win rate difference between top lane Mundo and jungle Mundo is over 4.5%. There's a 4.5% win rate delta between top Mundo and jungle Mundo. Now, there is some bias here, and I'll get into that in a second, but I actually like the idea of Riot saying, hey, I mean, first of all, jungle Mundo is OP to the tune of like 1.8%, and top Mundo is underpowered to the tune of 2%, so yes, we should just make these changes anyway, and I agree, like, just on a purely balanced perspective, but it's also good to be like, well, but also really, though, people who like Mundo and miss playing Mundo were, they missed top lane Mundo. They were top laners, so I'm a fan of that one. So the changes are a fairly large increase to health regeneration. This, of course, is going to add on to his actual base health regen in the stat. We'll talk about that in a second. They are heavily lowering the Infected Cleaver monster damage cap, but they're making it restore full health on anything that it hits, so you can just Cleaver minions. You don't have to last hit them. You just get all your health back and you Cleaver minions. So really, really big sustain buffs. And by the way, junglers basically have run out of sustain, so that's not relevant. And then, hey, here's 10 flat AD off of Masochism at... I might have gotten something wrong a little bit here. We'll see. All right. Let's talk about the changes here to Dr. Mundo. So here is Mundo's health per minute. I prefer health per minute as a regen stat because it's a little bit easier to understand. So we went from 2 to 600 to 270 to 870. Then the buff is more late game focused because keep in mind, you could build things like Gore Drinker, which has % health regen on it, and a few other items like Knight's Vow, like that was possible, sure, but in general, you're not really buying health regen, % health regen as Dr. Mundo. Doran Shield, for example, has flat health regen on it. I'm 90% certain. So you're not going to scale your like champion's base health per 5 stat. You are going to scale your champion's max health though, and that's going to keep inflating here, right? So when you actually buy that Doran Shield and your max health goes up by 60 or 80, you get 2.5% of that every 5 seconds, which is going to add up a little bit. So what it comes down to is this is a pretty big regen buff, right? To the tune of about the 35 to 40%, as you can see the numbers here. That number increases over time. Maximally, you're looking at a 60% increase on this. So this eventually trends toward 60% as you build more and more and more health. You're never going to hit that number, of course. There's an asymptote there regardless, but this is a pretty substantial passive health regen. And yeah, by the way, Dr. Mundo, in fact, has the highest passive health regen of any champion in the game. It's super not close, outside of things, again, that are like more like active health regen, which is like Tradamir getting stacked and hitting Q on Bloodlust. That's probably more sustained overall, but, that's not passive. Okay, the next thing is Dr. Mundo's Q max health damage. Because Jungle Mundo maxes Q second, he is going to be on rank 1 of the ability for the first 7 levels of the game, and that means, wow, this ability does 1/3 the damage to jungle monsters. Now, 100 damage is still pretty good for an ability, right? That's higher than most rank 1 abilities deal, so, and it's like a low cooldown, like 4.5 seconds, something like that, so that should still feel good, but this is a very substantial DPS nerf for, a 1 rank wonder. This is a very big deal for Jungle Mundo's clear speed. Once you're absurd, you've already got, most of Chem Tank or whatever, you don't have to care as much anymore, and, the nerfs aren't as bad, but yeah, pretty big deal. And just to make sure we're sanity checking, hey, how much, and it's not really max health, it is current health, with a floor anyway, but like, hey, how much health did they have to have for this to deal max damage? 1,500? That is everything that's smiteable. Every smiteable monster had 1,500 health. Now, to be fair, your second, your third, maybe your fourth cleaver probably wasn't hitting against 1,500 health anymore, right? And you were actually dealing closer and closer to the minimum damage. And so this nerf is not always this number. In fact, the minimum is unchanged, which I believe is 80, and then plus 50 per rank afterwards. So, up until your monster has under 500 health, you're still doing at least 100. But for a fairly large portion of the game, you were dealing 300 and aren't anymore. This is obviously a clear speed nerf. And then finally, here's Dr. Mundo. So the thing that I might have gotten wrong is maybe I was supposed to add these numbers together and didn't. This could be my fault, but the flat bonus AD we can add up, and the max bonus AD, I'm assuming I'm right, but it could be wrong here. But here is Mundo's base AD plus Emax. And this is Emax first. This is still using Jungle Mundo as the, I should say Emax Mundo as the primary target here. Yep, he had, 100 base deck damage at level 1. It's pretty good. Turns out it's pretty good clear ability. Obviously, there's the headbutt active as well, which we're not including here. We're just talking about his overall AD. But yeah, down 10% in the early game, down 5% mid to late game. But the one thing I want to point out, and to reinforce it yet again, is Dr. Mundo in top lane should be doing Emax way more than he is. So what's interesting is it's improving. So I believe I forget if I looked at the last patch or if I looked at the patch where Mundo E got buffed, I forget. But whatever the before point I looked at, the skill order for top Mundo was 75% Qmax and 14% Emax. And I was like, folks, this is abysmal. Y'all should be Emaxing. This is not okay. In 11.7, it's 66.25. So it went from 74.15 basically to 65.25. So we got like 10 percentage points more players into Emax. So we're getting there. We're bringing people over to the right skill order. People are learning. They're learning way too slow, right? It's been months since we talked about the last set of Dr. Mundo buffs, and there's only like 5 to 15,000 people who watch these videos, but y'all need to educate the other Mundo players. Like, hey, folks, like, get in there, please. Emax on Mundo, do it in the top lane. It is a huge win rate lift to go Emax on Mundo. And last time I looked at this, I spot checked like various matchups. Like, it's not just the AP matchups, right? It's not just, you Emax because the bonus MR against... No. Is there a Darius? You Emax to punch him in the face and then headbutt him. Like, Emax on Mundo, Emax on Mundo. It's correct for all of his builds. Anyway, yeah, this is going to do a lot to nerf. It's going to do a lot to nerf Jungle Mundo, right? He's doing less cleaver damage. He's got 10 less AD at most points in time. The regen changes aren't going to help him very much, so it's not a very big deal. But top Mundo's getting some big regen changes. And then to be fair, like, this doesn't do anything. This is a nerf to Mundo in all roles. And they're hoping that the regen changes enough, which I think is probably true. So Mundo Jungle should lose some. Mundo top, I believe, should gain some. Next up is Gnar. Now, Gnar is not a huge problem in solo queue. About 0.6% below average, which is where Cassiopeia lives, but, that's fine. That's not something that, like, needs buffs or needs nerfs, but, not objectively great in solo queue, to be clear. But has an 81% pro presence, which is obviously a bit much. They wanna peg down Gnar a little bit because he's just like the de facto top laner, and so I totally understand. Now, one thing I found kind of funny, I remember Huni, I believe it was Huni, getting a lot of flack for this earlier on in the season, around, like, let's call it week 2 or something, where Huni was just spam picking Gnar. I have found that Huni tends to be right more than other people about what's going to be good before everyone else realizes it. I feel like I really remember people like, why is Huni just playing Gnar every game? Why is Huni just, like, analysts, like, on the LCS and Twitter and stuff as well, just like, wow, all he does is just pick Gnar over and over again. Like, why is this guy in Gnar one trick? What's going on? And it's like, well, because Gnar's actually the best top laner. And Huni figured it out before everyone else did. That's why. There's this trend of, and it still happens, so I'm going to keep bringing it up. There's this trend of people seeing a champion that, like, they hadn't seen in pro in the last 6 months. And a player keeps playing it, and they're like, what is this? Why don't you pick a good champion? It's like, you don't play pro. You have no idea how good Gnar is in pro. Pros don't know how good champions are in pro. Urgot's, like, most giga-busted patches, he didn't get played. And then, like, we go forward to Worlds where he gets nerfed 3 times, and now he's the most picked champion in the game. It's like, this happens all the time. Like, we should, like, please don't trust champion pick rates as what's actually good in pro. Pros don't know. We know this. We have infinite data this is true. They get about 80% of the way there, which is pretty good. That's better than most are going to get. Like, I can't predict with 80% accuracy what the pro champions are going to be. Pros figure it out. But there's the last 20% that just no one figures out. Let Huni play his Gnar. He's good at it. It's actually the best top laner. Oh, look, here we are getting Gnar nerfed. This kind of thing happens a lot. So, Gnar nerf, good choice. He's like the second highest presence champion in pro play right now. So Gnar has an interesting trait in that his actual base movement speed as mini Gnar changes with character level. It starts at like 325, and then it ends, or 335? It starts at 335, which is like 10 over like baseline slowest, not counting Janek, she's an exception. And ends at 355, which is the highest baseline. Which is like, to be fair, if you're a level 18 mini Gnar, yeah, you're really squishy. Like his health scaling is atrocious. He's a squishy boy. He also, of course, has percent move speed from when Hyper pops. Now, Hyper's move speed pops two ways. Auto, or like auto Q auto on a target, pops Hyper, gives move speed. Or when Mega Gnar reverts back into Mini Gnar, which gives him the move speed to like get back out of range. So this move speed actually pops fairly often. It, again, scales based on ultimate rank, so you can kind of, see the breakpoints are at 6 and 11 and 16. I don't think Riot is actually intentionally buffing late game Gnar. It's just, and I'm a fan of this, them just picking round numbers and saying, look, we're going to go from 30 to 75 and just go 20 to 80 because we want a pretty sizable, 10-5% nerf at ranks 1 and 0 and 1. And then we don't really care that he's technically faster at rank 3 because it doesn't matter. And so indeed, for the first 10 levels of the game, Gnar is in fact less fast as mini Gnar. And this continues the trend, and I'm a fan of this as well, of Riot trying to continue to nerf mini Gnar because Mega Gnar is the cool part. And when they buff Gnar, they buff Mega Gnar, saying, hey, yeah, your ult cooldown's shorter. Hey, your ult does more damage. Your slows are better. Your stuns are better. You're tankier. You do all these other things. Yeah, mini Gnar is less of a poke champion, right? You get fewer boomerangs. They have less move speed. You have less of a slow. Like, those are all good changes because mini Gnar is really frustrating. He is resourceless, percent health damage, slows, pokes, and hops away. Like, now he's meant to be able to handle playing top lane, so like I get it. He needs tools. He can't just like, be a zero ability ranged minion. That's trash. But yeah, as long as he can compete in top lane and isn't complete BS, they've managed to put Mini Gnar in a good spot. And then, hey, Mega Gnar is the payoff. Like, I think that's great. So, fan of like the direction of the last like 18 sets of Gnar changes. 81% pro presence. Win rate is okay. Like, yes, this will be a nerf, so Gnar will be slightly weak in solo queue still. But I mean, with any champion that's like within 1% of baseline, if you're good at the champion, it's a good champ for you. Like, if you're a good Gnar player, this is fine. You're completely fine here. Next up is LeBlanc, another champ that Riot is trying to add into pro play. She is about 1.2% win rate below baseline, so bit of room for buffs. And 1% pro presence. Now, I'm going to say this has got to be one of the highest win rates I have seen LeBlanc have while still being pro viable. This seems pretty incredible that she's at like, just 1%-ish below and is not taking over pro. LeBlanc so frequently just smashes pro play. So I don't know if that's just pros just decided they don't really want to play LeBlanc very much, or if the meta has changed so much that LeBlanc's not viable. Like maybe her suite of matchups isn't very good in pro. But pretty big damage increase. 10 flat damage on Q is 20 total damage on the Q pop. This is a really, really large amount of damage. This is a really, 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 really big deal. I think LeBlanc is probably just straight up OP after this patch. This is the kind of buff that I'm almost certain is greater than a 1% win rate lift. This is a huge, huge, huge deal. I think we probably see LeBlanc at MSI if pros are willing to put in the effort and time to like relearn the champion. But I'd have a hard time finding LeBlanc not get played. She should be played in solo queue. She should be played in pro. LeBlanc is absolutely in. Next up is Lee Sin. I gotta say, I play Lee Sin a fair bit. I think I'm Mastery 7 on Lee Sin, so like, I have, a fair few dozen games on him. I wouldn't call myself an expert in any way, but I have found, and this is because I'm not a great Lee Sin player, I know better players can do this well, that like maximally casting all of my abilities for DPS while also keeping my passive up at all times when clearing camps, especially things like Dragon, where I really want to get this down as fast as possible, is difficult. And so I'm a fan of Tempest being a shorter cooldown so that I can just hit the button and it's back up, and I'm probably not going to run out of cooldowns. I mean, in general, like, this is just like a clear speed increase, right? He's just going to get E a second time on chickens, maybe a third time. That's going to help stuff out. It's pure DPS. It can affect team fights, sure. I'm still a proponent of them trying to find ways to buff Lee Sin E even more so that maxing E second can be viable again. Because all anyone does is max safeguard second, and I want to see them find ways to change that around. But regardless, yeah, this is a smart change. If they did like 10 to 8 scaling, that wouldn't help anything because Lee Sin maxes E last, and it wouldn't change the incentive to rank up abilities differently anyway. But yeah, Lee Sin, by the way, is about the same place as LeBlanc right now, actually like 1.3% below baseline. So Lee's not in a terribly bad spot, honestly. His items seem to work out okay for him. He's in a pretty good spot overall. Seems like a cool champion. I mean, I really love playing Lee Sin. He's one of my favorite champions for sure. I'll probably start playing him after the patch because he'll be strong enough to feel like he's worth playing. But yeah, huge fan of Lee Sin. Absolute great champion. Another champion that gets very little pro play, 2% presence in 11.6. So this is a pretty big deal though. This is at least 0.5% win rate, maybe up to 1% win rate. Maybe it's more than that, but like I don't think his clear speed is going to get that much faster off of this because so much of his damage is coming from massive auto attacks just because of the really high attack speed and the Qs and everything else that I don't think Tempest is making your clears that much faster. Like you probably aren't getting 6 camps by the time Scuttle spawns, so you're not getting that much out of it. But I mean, it's still good, right? It's still a good change, and I'm glad we're seeing it. Obviously, it's just a percentage, 20% shorter, so nothing special here. Orianna maxes E last, and she's getting 4 less armor and magic resist as a result of Command Protect. Now, of course, that would be on her or on someone else, but here is her armor, and here is her magic resist without runes, with the ball on her based on her normal skill order, which is, rank 2 comes at level 13. So about 3% squishier in the early game, kind of against both damage types, really. And by the way, yes, she has very, 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 very low armor and magic resist. Double checking something real quick. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah, she actually has 17 base armor. It's exceptionally low. They wanted AD Assassin to be a potential counterpick against Orianna. I mean, they almost had a change where the ball only gave magic resist, but they eventually decided to go back on it. But they just, yeah, she has 17 base armor. Even with max rank of the ball, which is 30 more, she still only has 68 armor at level 18. Like, she has very, very, very low armor. Sure, that's compensated by the ball existing. I mean, that's honestly relevant and true. But, I mean, it also says, 26 base MR, so that's also a fair bit low. That's kind of the one downside, right, is I want to say, like, very quickly, like, I don't actually hate this. Orianna has lower than normal armor and magic resist because of the ball, right? Because she so often grants herself bonus armor and MR. I mean, mathematically, the bonus armor MR means more when she has fewer stats, but also it means that, well, look, here's a champion with 27 armor and 36 magic resist. I mean, that's pretty good for a ranged champion. I mean, 36 MR is outstanding for a ranged champion. Like, no wonder she's good in mid lane with all the mages because her baseline MR is 36. Assuming she can get the ball on herself in time to block any spells. So, like, yeah, no one's surprised that she's actually very good in mid lane. And then, okay, her top lane, like, well, she doesn't play top lane, but like, yeah, her armor, yeah, it's actually trash. 27 is actually pretty low, even for a ranged champion. And that's, of course, with the ball on. Whereas 36 is higher than like literally every champion's MR in the game, right? So like even with the ball, and okay, sure, post nerf even. Basically, yeah. Now she's in a world where she has like, pretty normal magic resist values. Like 32 is like, well, you're just level 1 set. It's not that inflated. And then obviously the scaling is like not special anyway. So her MR is now in line, but the armor is still pretty crap. So this nerf was enough to make her MR actually now in line with mages, which can matter. And again, the ball's not on her at all times. And of course, giving the ball to someone else as your Nocturne runs in or something, like that champ's going to want the extra 4 armor and MR that's not here anymore. Like this is a nerf. Of note though, Orianna is like 3% below baseline in solo queue. She is very, very weak in solo queue. And is the 3rd or 2nd most played champ in pro play at 82% presence. So she's really in there. And they're trying to make some room in pro play for more champions. Orianna trying to have a weak landing phase. Yep, I mean, this might finally be enough now that she doesn't have the highest MR in the game at level 1. Maybe we get there finally. But lo and behold, mages with the highest MR turn to be really good in mid, which is all mages. Who would have thought? But again, to say the same point for the fourth time, they lowered her armor because they wanted people to play Talon against her. Unfortunately, Talon is only played in solo queue. So Riot managed to nerf her solo queue win rate while not giving us any pro play counter picks. I think if they wanted, so here's what I think. I'll do a final conclusion here. I think if Riot wanted to actually change Orianna to let her win rate go up in solo queue and nerf her in pro, you would have the ball block physical, maybe not have the ball only block physical damage, but have the ball only give armor. Because again, people actually play AD mids in solo queue. They play Zed, they play Talon, they play stuff. Okay, sure, Lucian exists as like the one other option there, and yeah, Tristana, but like the percentage of AD mids is way higher in solo queue, and so you would get a solo queue win rate gain, and Orianna can just have 30 base MR and no way of getting more of it, and you can actually deal good damage to her. And now Syndra actually pops this champion, right? And you suddenly feel a lot better. All right, let us move on. We get the Rammus update. Huge fan of this one. The big, we're not going to bury the lead. Soaring Slam is now an ability. The ult is new. Rammus leaps into the air, slams down, deals some damage, adds a slow, and then generates aftershocks for 4 seconds. Oh, baby. Stacking the initial slow up to 4 times. I believe I kind of said this correctly. Damage to the center is increased up to 150%. Based on the distance traveled. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. First off, let's talk about the numerical nerfs. 0 to 20 damage off Powerball. Here you go, you max it first. Bam, easy one. Defensive Ball Curl. Basic attacks now extend the duration of Ball Curl by 0.4 seconds up to a maximum of 4 additional seconds, which would be a 10-second duration. And now, I want you to guess, can Rammus get 10 auto attacks off during defensive ball curl? Yes or no? And, as a third option, is there a maybe? Is there a, it depends what level he is, or it depends on frenzying taunt? It depends on, what's your answer? Is it always yes, always no, always yes or always no with frenzying taunt, or somewhere in the middle, what level is that breakpoint if it's the case? You're going to have to make up numbers because obviously there's no way you should know this like easily by yourself. You're just going to like guess, 13. Well, here you go. It's 12. So, to be fair, I didn't do the full-on calculus. This is technically kind of a calculus problem in that you're just, right, you're basically doing derivatives here. But the duration of 6 seconds, and then you can basically attack about 5 times with frenzying taunt on with W. Because keep in mind, your W extends frenzying taunt's duration. So you actually get, this whole duration of attack speed. But this does a lot, by the way, right? So getting an extra, 2, almost 3 seconds on your W. And to be fair, this is not counting stat shards. So Rammus would go for the attack speed stat shard. That would help as well. But if your, defensive ball curls up for 8.8, let's call it 9 seconds, because with the stat shard, you probably get 9 seconds. You're getting 3 more seconds of defensive ball curl, which means 3 more seconds of them hitting you and taking damage. It's also 3 more seconds of your auto attacks, I believe, dealing more damage, because I believe ball curl increases the damage of that. That could be wrong. It increases your armor, so it kind of has to by default. But it's also 3 more seconds of frenzying taunt's attack speed being active. This is a very, very, very large clear speed buff. Because your attack speed story literally lasts 50% longer, and your big damage back lasts 50% longer. From my experience jungling Rammus, at least until you get your Bomby Cinder active, you really need these things to actually kill the camps off. It is, and even when you have one, it's not like blue buff's dying to Bomby Cinder. You need to auto-attack that thing 15 times or whatever, and it takes a while. Obviously, the big winner is Soaring Slam. So it's upfront flat damage. It lands in a pretty small slow for 1.5, but then generates aftershocks at the target location for 4 seconds, dealing 20 to 40 damage each time, and stacking the initial slow up to 4 times. So I'm assuming you can only ever get 4 times this and not more. So Oh yeah, and taunt duration went down a little bit, right? Here's the second nerf, right? We nerfed this by 0 to 20, and then this got nerfed by 0.05 to 0.25 seconds, which is this duration change. Okay, so this is actually... Okay, so the damage part is accurate here, okay? So if I can only ever keep you inside of tremors for the duration of, like, I powerball, I taunt, I hit R, right? If that's Rammus, and then after the taunt ends, you flash away, old Rammus only got this damage out of tremors. And by the way, that was a 40% ability power ratio. You only got this much damage out of tremors, which, by the way, is really bad for an ultimate. This is an ultimate, and it dealt 60 damage over 2 seconds. Like, yeah, it scales really, really hard, and I'm kind of a fan of ultimates that triple in power in some cases, but, like, man, imagine a rank 3 ultimate that deals 180 damage. That sounds abysmal. That sounds terrible. And so in the same boat, if I land my Soaring Slam, and then I get 2 Aftershocks, because you flashed away off the taunt or whatever, I get this much damage. Now, I might be biasing the numbers here a little bit, because Soaring Slam hits, and then 1 second later, I get an Aftershock, and then 1 second later, I get an Aftershock, right? So it's slam, hit, hit, and that's 2 seconds, because it's instantaneous, 1 second, 2 seconds. For this thing, it's potentially, like, I might have done this wrong here, because theoretically with the old tremors, I hit the button, it deals damage, and then 1 second later, and then 1 second later. So I think actually it's correct to make this make it this number instead. So that's my bad. But still, right? If you're getting instantaneous damage and then max damage, it's still this. But I'm not sure which one is true, right? Like, I'm not sure if it's I hit the button and then, like, 1 second elapses and it's tremors, because, like, I feel like that's kind of true. Either way, it's one of these, right? It's either this or it's this, and I couldn't tell you for sure. I didn't test it. We'll pick this because why not? On the other side, though, right, we have the maximum damage, which is, look, they stayed in for the entire duration. And yeah, the old ability being between 240 and 720 is pretty good. That's actually some pretty decent damage. And in fact, you know, the new Tremors is a nerf. But, like, let's be clear, how often were they in there for all 8 seconds of Tremors? Almost never, right? Like, honestly, just, yeah, not that often. And even besides the point, burst matters, right? Like, imagine, you know, like, even, let's not even consider the Jinx flashing away and living. How about the Jinx dying to 230 damage coming in? Right? Like, what if this 55 health makes the difference between Jinx just being dead? It's like, well, that's just better than Jinx flashing away and healing back up. So in general, I think this is a very big buff on the damage. I think it's even better on the slow. So this is, once again, this is the slow at 2 seconds. So the way Soaring Slam works, right, is you hit them, you land slow instantly, and then you generate aftershocks for 4 seconds. So 1 second passes, 2 second passes, and you have stacked the slow, right? So functionally, oh, you know what? I got this wrong. This is actually ×3 because I am hitting you with the slam, and then Aftershock 1, and then Aftershock 2, and I'm getting 3, at 2 seconds, I'm essentially getting 3 stacks, right? Over the duration of my taunt, I'm getting that. So in the same boat here, you know, we're going to be charitable to the other one as well, and look at the difference in slows. And by the way, here is why Tremors felt like crap. Because you had you hit them with Powerball, you taunt them, you turn on Tremors right away, and when the taunt ends, you have a 24% slow. Really? 24? No wonder they like, Ball Curl slows me by more than that. They outrun me if I have Ball Curl on, which I'm incentivized to do. I'm supposed to keep Ball Curl on. Well, they outrun you. Because Tremors sucked. So, yep, assuming we are getting instantaneous plus hit plus hit. The old slow is 24 to 36. The new slow is 45 to 60. That seems way better. But because of how I did my numbers over here, we're going to pretend... Oh, yeah, so real quick. This is... why this is green is this is the amount of move speed your opponent has compared to pre-patch. Right? A 45% slow compared to 24% slow. They move at 3/4 of the speed. Okay. But now, what if? What if somehow we're in a magical world where they were suppressed for 18 years and we put on our max slow? Well, 8 seconds in, they're slow by 64 to 96%. To be fair here, this slow actually hits at 3 seconds. If I have my math right, if I have my tooltip reading right, we slow instantaneously, and then we aftershock three aftershocks. Oh, wait. I guess here's how I'm maybe misreading it. Stacking the initial slow, right? It's generating aftershocks that deal damage to stack the slow 4 times, as in 4 aftershocks. So there's a good chance that we actually have like this going on, and this is our actual max slow. Now, I don't believe 100% slows actually exist. I believe you just get to walk away at 110 move speed. So this isn't really accurate, but yeah, it turns out that actually this is just the better ability at all points in time. If you can actually get a 5th stack of the slow. This is me not reading and parsing sentences very well, but yeah, the CC is just undeniably better on the crashdown. The damage is, I would say, in most cases, just much better on the crashdown. This is, by the way, the AP ratios. So this is if I'm only hitting, 3 aftershocks. Like, okay, maybe it's like 60%, right? If we are getting 3 aftershocks here. But like, yep, AP ratio is better. Seems good. And then, okay, if we really were to get the entire duration out, the old AP ratio is 1.6, the new one is 1.0. Okay, the AP scaling is worse. But realistically, yeah, this is a buff to buff to Rammus. Feels good. Alrighty, so next up, and not that his win rate matters, but Rammus was about 0.7% over baseline for win rate, so decent champion. I think these are overall buffs, though, for Rammus, and should play the champion for sure. Okay, so Rumble is being shifted around, much like Dr. Mundo. Rumble is not a good top laner, but is very good elsewhere, and Riot is trying to shift that back around. We're continuing the trend of non-standard base MR, which I'm fully behind, and the delta here is really, really, really absurd. So despite the pick rate being pretty close to 50-50 between top and mid Rumble, I think that's true, I don't remember anymore, the win rate difference is 6.5%. There is a 6.5% win rate gap between top Rumble and mid Rumble. That is absurd. Top Rumble can never be good if mid Rumble is this good. So every top Rumble player is just hard inting by playing the champion. Like, this is rough. He's got no pro presence. It's at 1%, so whatever. And so they're saying, look, we realize tanks and fighters are in top lane, so Rumble, you're going to be better against tanks and fighters. Now, you're weaker in mid because your base MR is going down. Okay. Yep. Here is... Oh, yeah, and here's the Rammus R cooldown. Whatever. He's still buffed. Here's Rumble's MR, and here is his durability against magic damage as a result. This matters a lot in the late game. 3% durability loss early, but still an 8% durability loss at 18. It's a very big deal. This really, really, really hampers his mid lane. Now, to be fair, there's champions like Ornn and Malphite and stuff up in top that deal magic damage and a lot of magic damage, and those are relevant numbers. But in general, I mean, Rumble already hard claps Malphite, and the MR is not going to change that very much. But here's the big change, okay? Rumble, instead of doing flat bonus damage on the passive, now does a lower flat damage, but with percent max health. And as my minor claim to fame, I'm not saying I'm the owner of the idea, but I had this idea and I suggested it to the designer, and the designer said it was a cool idea. And then the very next email had this change in it. I'm not saying it was only me, but at least I thought of it. While overheated, Rumble gains 50% attack speed. Because now it's actually going to feel good to be overheated instead of feeling clunky. It fits the thematic of being overheated because you're literally overclocking the machine. It really, really functions. But right, the design intent of do max health damage, great job of the designer. The attack speed bonus while overheating, I think, is really flavorful, and I mean reinforces this mechanic really, really nicely. So let's talk about the damage. I did a couple things here. So first of all, here is the auto attack DPS for Rumble. during the passive, before and after. Rumble's baseline attack speed is so high that, yes, his DPS is, in fact, 55 at level 1 while overheated. It's very, very low. What I chose here as the example target, by the way, was the 75th percentile for health and health growth, which I'm just assuming to be a generic fighter. It's something like 585 plus 93 health, I think, is the 75th percentile for health. So yeah, when you suddenly do percent health damage and gain 50% attack speed, which just by itself is a 50% DPS gain, your damage gains are really, really large. And so suddenly your auto attack DPS during your passive has been increased by 80-ish%. That is a really, really big deal. And the more health your opponents buy, the more this matters. Now, the more AP you buy, the flatter this is because the AP ratio is unchanged. And you just trend toward the 50% attack speed growth. And even that trends down as you gain champion attack speed with levels. So this sort of trends towards 50% based on AP. But it trends upwards based on more health your opponents buy. So, it's going to stay at about an 80% DPS gain, which is pretty good. And then here, I believe I did this right. I could be wrong, but I think I did this correctly. This is how much total magic damage is your passive dealing. Now, the one thing I'm not including here is the bonus autos you are getting because of the attack speed, giving you more physical damage autos. This is purely how much total magic damage am I dealing over 6 seconds when I count my champion's base attack speed and attack speed growth. The passive did, now to be fair, overheating, if you could auto attack the entire time, was worth 97 damage level 1. That's pretty good for a passive. Now, to get the passive, you have to silence yourself and auto attack the entire time, which is very difficult, and that can be really rough. And, good luck getting that many auto attacks off at level 18 in a big team fight. Like, that can be really tough. But, theoretically, that's the DPS. Here, yeah. Not DPS, total damage. If you fight an overheated Rumble post-patch, he is doing 260 bonus magic damage in total from the passive. This is an absurdly large number. If you actually battle with Rumble, he will fuck you up. I can't think of an ability that does this much damage outside of like Volibear E against a dragon, right? Like, this is an absurd amount of damage. And it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. If you can actually brawl late game, you've got 1,200 damage here in terms of I'm just punching you. And that's just from the passive. This is very good. Again, this number somewhat lies to you. You cannot re-up Scrap Shield. You cannot re-up Electro Harpoons. Okay, the first 2 seconds, you're going to run fast and they're slow. And then, Malphite Qs you and you're not hitting them anymore. So, you're really not guaranteed to get this damage. In fact, you are functionally never going to get this damage. But, hey, here's the thing, by the way. I didn't look this up, and I have no idea if it's even here. What if there's no jungle monster damage cap? What if Jungle Rumble is just giga-busted and you just punch Dragon to death? I have no idea if there's actually a cap that's not listed here. There in fact might be one. I don't know. I'm sure someone tried on PvE already and I missed it, but this is very strong and a very big buff. The final change is Electro Harpoon can shred anywhere between 10 and 30% of your target's magic resist by landing harpoons. So again, it's, hey, we are trying to fight tanks well. We are trying to fight tanks well. We are trying to be weaker in mid lane. I really do believe you had to take a change list this severe to fix this because you have a 7% win rate difference, which is not tenable off of I tweaked your armor and MR a little bit. No, that's not enough. And I'm making fun of myself with that one, not the designer here. I don't actually think you can fix everything with base stat changes, but base stat changes would not be enough here. There's no way at all. But I am happy seeing them because it helps to reinforce the theme. So here is based on my target's magic resist, and I'm only going up to 115 because I know they can get more than that, but I don't care. Here is their base MR. I mean, I'm literally duplicating the numbers here, okay? Here's what a 10% shred does for you. It drops their MR to this, which is a 2.5 to 5.7% DPS, well, just overall magic damage gain. It doesn't affect your physical damage of your punches, but the rest of your kit's magic damage. So here you go. So against, you know, a squishy, you do 2.5, 3% more damage. You know, a lot of targets going to have like, you know, MR runes here. And so, you know, off your stat shard, here you go. But if you can double stack the Empowered Harpoon and get a 30% shred, you're looking at 7.5 to 20% more damage. So yeah, you know, a moderately MR stacked. I mean, this is Merc Treads plus Chem Tank plus runes. Let's see, Chem Tank's what, 30, 35. Merc Treads like 25, so you're at plus 60-ish. You're at, you know, let's call it 40 something from base stats and runes. So yeah, we're like at 100 something. Like this is actually pretty reasonable for like my opponent has Mythic plus boots. Yeah, 5 to, you know, 18% increased damage. Based on, you know, hitting one small one or two big ones, you know, every number somewhere in the middle there at that point. Yeah, this is pretty meaningful at first item. It, you know, continues to grow from there. The damage amp means more and more and more. Yeah, this is cool stuff. I don't know if it's going to completely flip the script, but it's going to help top Rumble for sure, and it's going to hurt mid Rumble for sure. Alrighty, Thresh is getting a cooldown increase on early ranks of Flay. So Thresh still is win rate positive for doing WMAX second. That is still the stronger build at Platinum Plus. I didn't check everywhere else. Of note is there is some indication that Emax first is a viable build. It is certainly not the popular one, but in certain segments, the win rate is competitive or even superior to Qmax. I'm assuming any matchup where you're actually just chain autoing people, and it's like, well, I'm not going to land hooks here, but I'm going to walk up and auto this Sivir. Like, that's probably just good, right? Because what exactly is Sivir Tom Kench going to do to punish you? So you're not going to hook them. It's not going to get anything done. So, like, why not just max Flay and just boop and get that done? So I think there are matchups where Thresh should really consider Flay max. This incentivizes the Flay max first, and of course incentivizes Flay max second. The most common build, though, is Flay max second, so here's the data table. And yeah, for the vast majority of the game, Flay is longer cooldown. This is a nerf to Thresh. Thresh is a solid 1.2% win rate above baseline, and is the most, or second most played champ. I keep saying most played when it's not. 94% presence is the, it's behind Hecarim. Hecarim's not going to nerf, because Hecarim was nerfed in 11.7, I believe. So second most prioritized champion in pro play is Thresh. Third was Orianna. Fourth was Gnar. So good nerfs here. And then next up we have Vladimir. And Vladimir is doing okay. Under, you know, less than 1% below baseline in top lane. Actually doing slightly better than average in mid lane. So a reasonably viable champion overall. But they're saying, hey, Vlad's not doing as well as we thought he would do, so here's 0 to 1 seconds off the Q cooldown. So here you go. Now, you could argue that a Q cooldown means more for top lane than it does for mid lane, in that maybe you're scrapping with a Darius something more often. Ultimately, this is going to buff both roles, though. Vlad mid is going to be in a very, very good spot. Vlad mid is going to be quite strong. Vlad top should be completely viable as well. Like, I think Vlad's going to be in the running for sure. I don't know if we're going to, you know, see ourselves much of top Vlad, but like we're still in a jungle tank meta right now in pro. And we're seeing, you know, support tanks as well. So like there's clearly room to play not tanks top lane. And in fact, a lot of our picks are things like Renekton and Jace and Kennen and you know, Gangplank and such. So it's not like teams, you know, absolutely need to play tanks up there. And Vlad can definitely join the list. The pool, as you will. So next up, we have some pretty significant changes to Yorick. All right, so first of all, there is a flat and scaling nerf to Mistwalker damage. Overall, his ghouls just deal less damage. Additionally, Morning Mist, the Mist leap, instead of your ghouls just critting for 2x on the first hit, instead, they do 40% bonus damage until your target has been hit 8 times. Now, my first read of this, I'm pretty sure I fixed, which is, it's not every ghoul has 8 bonus damage attacks, it's 8 total bonus damage attacks, meaning normally it's 4 ghouls each hitting twice. Essentially, they've just slightly delayed the damage output. Now, that said, doing 40% bonus damage twice is obviously worse than doing 100% bonus damage once. This is objectively a nerf. This is objectively a nerf. These are numerical weaknesses, so we can just talk about that. Here is the Yorick ghoul damage. It is down by about 15%. The ratio is further lowered, so the more AD you buy, the more this nerf hits. Ow. Next up, here's the next table, and it's Here is the 4 times 1. You have 4 ghouls, they all charged, and they instantly died somehow. Well, here's the damage before and after. It is, again, pretty substantially cut down. Nerfed by 28 to eventually 33%. That is a pretty big damage nerf. Additionally here, I am, I believe, adding in E's flat damage as well. I'm adding in just the minimum damage of E. Basically, E deals percent current health damage, but has a minimum cap. I'm just doing minimum damage just for ease of numbers. Obviously, there can be more damage here in this ability, but here is how much E with 4 graves dealt with 1 attack each before and after. And yeah, it's down pretty substantially. Here is your ghouls all getting a second attack off, or maybe, one of the ghouls died, but the 4th ghoul attacked a 3rd time, maybe, right? Assuming you're actually getting the entire buff out. Well, obviously the nerf is less severe because, of course, more of the damage is backloaded, but, much like this change, it's still weaker, right? And obviously the numbers are, in fact, lower because, 80% is not 100%. Of course, it's less damage. So it's wow, right? You really, really, really nerfed Yorick, and he's not even that OP. Wait. Here's the before and after of 11.6. Because the instant E charge, even with the baseline damage of ghouls being lower, the upfront damage is higher, right? I landed E and I whacked you. That damage is still better. Obviously, it's the same at 11.8 as it is in 11.8 because it's the same number. But yes, in 11.6, this damage was, in fact, a lot lower, even with the old ghoul damage. And lo and behold, more damage. And then, if in fact they tank a second auto attack as well, a 40% lift on this damage is larger than that number. So indeed, the numbers keep going up, and the damage difference is still there. So a level 5 all-in still does 350 damage with 2 ghoul auto attacks. Whereas before, it dealt 421, and that was maybe a bit high. So yeah, they have objectively buffed the E ghoul burst damage. And one thing I want to point out, I think the design of these changes overall is really nice. I'm a fan of the design work done on Yorick, because one of the big things with Yorick is that he is OP in low elo and underpowered in high elo in general, because weaker players, weaker players in general get overwhelmed, right? They understand the game less well, so they are less prepared to react to situations that happen. Especially an unpopular champion like Yorick is not in their games very often. Do you expect a bronze player or a silver player to know every champion's every ability? I don't. You shouldn't either. Do literally all of you know that Yorick ghouls get one shot by getting auto attacked? I mean, maybe, but you're also hardcore enough that you watch patch rundowns in your free time on YouTube. So you're not the example average player, So essentially what I'm coming around to circle around to, for my point, is that the more you can front load no counterplay ghoul damage, the better you flatten this problem out. So what happens is weaker players don't know to just auto attack the ghouls, right? Or just spam Q on Aurelia and just actually heal off of the ability. Weaker players take more ghoul auto attacks. Strong players kill the ghouls rapidly and just knock them out, and there's never ghouls alive. In fact, it's part of the reason why the E summons ghouls from the graves when it flies out, because essentially, a good player would just actively kill all of Yorick's ghouls and just earn 6 gold from them, and then Yorick would hit E and there's no ghouls and nothing happens. And a bad player would not know to kill Yorick's ghouls just in general, and then he hits E and they're ow, 800 health! So the more you can, technically you are removing counterplay, but, champions are allowed to be good. By default, the idea of lowering counterplay is not necessarily a negative, and by default, adding counterplay is not necessarily a positive. And vice versa either, right? In isolation, neither one is strictly, the better design choice. There should be an appropriate amount of counterplay to every champion, and that's based on the champion you're playing and the champion you're playing against and what they're trying to do and what they're supposed to do. Some things are meant to be reliable. Literally only Spell Shield and Black Shield and Zhonya's stop Vialt. She's unstoppable. She's generally pretty tanky. The suppression is a knockup, so you can't QSS. You are not allowed out. I'll just drink some water, I guess. And that's a design choice. And that's to make Vi feel reliable because it's a freaking ultimate and it's single target. And that makes sense. All right, I think we're going to live. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway. So, yeah. They are front-loading some of the damage so that people who are good at killing ghouls still get the Yorick experience. And they are also lowering the damage tail on ghouls so that players who don't really excel at killing ghouls quickly don't get crushed quite as hard. Excuse me. Now, there's probably still going to be, some kind of win rate by ELO deviation, but this pretty much objectively closes the gap. And I think that's great. So, well done, Riot Designer. Whew, sorry, jeez. Okay, the final thing that's happening, though, with Yorick that matters is a very big deal. Oh my gosh, ow, these tickets are hurting. Okay. The Maiden is now prioritized after all minions. It's not just the cannon now. It's now all minions. The Maiden is going to live for a very, very, very long time. Ow, jeez. This is really meaningful. The Maiden cooldown doesn't start until she's dead, which means basically her uptime. Ow. Her uptime is really, 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 really counted. So imagine something like Tibbers, for example, right? Where the intent with Tibbers is just like, you cast Tibbers, you do upfront damage, you stun some people, and you kind of intend for Tibbers to die. It doesn't really matter how long Tibbers lives. And as a result, and with that, Tibbers' cooldown starts when you summon Tibbers. So, 2 minutes later, it's up, ready to go again, and you just use Tibbers some more. And Maiden is meant to live for a while. So the cooldown doesn't start until she's dead. Which means if Maiden lives for 4 seconds and then dies and then goes on cooldown, right? Maiden doesn't do a bunch of upfront stuff. Like, yeah, okay, she summons some ghouls, but like she's meant to sit there auto-attacking, shoving away, doing a bunch of stuff for a long time. Right? It's not the same kind of input as something like Tibbers, where it's actually pretty strong and front-loaded. So, it's a really, really big deal that Maiden can live for more than, 12, 20 seconds. And so Maiden not getting just absolutely ruined by tower aggro is a really big deal, and you get a lot more turret damage done, you can get a lot more done. It feels great. So big fan of this. Great change. Should be a win rate bump as well. And considering that, ghoul damage is objectively lower in all cases compared to 11.7, but the Maiden is objectively better in all cases compared to 11.7. I can't say definitively which of these is going to be a bigger deal. I'm going to assume it's probably an overall nerf to Yorick, but still cool. Next up is Zac. Now, Zac is doing just fine. He is basically the pinnacle of balance. He is exactly on win rate. He doesn't really need help. But I guess they're saying, hey, his mid-game clear speed is a little bit weaker. They're giving the AP Bruiser builds a bit more strength. I'm assuming Zac is one of these champions, kind of like Soraka in support. That's allowed to be above 50% win rate. It actually could be that Zac is only played by Zac mains. I think it's probably true. Zac is probably a high mastery kind of champion, or in terms of like those who play him tend to have high mastery. And so, Zac being balanced in terms of like conceptually balanced, Zac's win rate would rest on the high side. Ultimately, again, pretty big damage bump here. 10 flat damage in W is meaningful, and then double the AP ratio. So here is Zac's W damage. I am once again choosing, I forget if I chose median or 75 percentile. Health is my example target, but maxing W second is what you do. And I mean, especially in the early game, like 10 flat damage is a really, really big deal for damage. Keep in mind that every blob you pick up lowers your W cooldown, so it's a really, really big deal for jungle clear. This is huge. This is a really, really meaningful clear speed increase to the damage. A really meaningful clear speed increase to the damage. So here is 100 AP percent. So what this is I said, okay, let's take the newly buffed 11.8 base damage values. Okay, you're doing this much damage with the W, and now with 100 ability power, because the AP ratio is percent health damage. I once again need to go back to my example target, the 585 plus 90 or whatever I actually used. Take my example target and say, okay, how much more damage am I doing because of the 4% ratio instead of the 2% ratio, right? So assuming the 11.8 base damage buffs already happened, what is the difference in the AP ratio in my total damage output? And it's actually pretty meaningful. So not only are you getting a 20 to eventually 5% damage increase, but even beyond that, you're getting another 16 to 14% of what you would have had for every 100 ability power you build, which is actually a pretty good incentive to build ability power. The idea of going Demonic Embrace, Night Harvester, Zac, yeah, maybe so. Or maybe it's Rocket Belt, I don't know. Next up, new junglers joining the mix. Now, in almost all these cases, these junglers are absolute trash. In some of these cases, they are not. It was kind of fun last night trying to figure out how I wanted to sort these things out and how I wanted to present the data. Some of these is easy, some of these is not. So, Hemorrhage, monster, damage, bonus. Now, I kind of... This is one thing I dislike about wording sometimes. So, obviously, Hemorrhage, in fact, deals bonus damage to monsters. Like, that is objectively true. But what's weird is it did not do 175% bonus damage to monsters. It dealt 175% damage to monsters. It had a 75% damage bonus. And the unfortunate thing is, you kind of have to read the wiki or go into game every single time you read something like this because it's not obvious. Did you know Hemorrhage did 2.75x or 1.75x? Is it now doing 3x or 4x damage? It's not obvious based on the wording. It doesn't really matter, but ultimately, here is Hemorrhage's damage over the full 5 seconds of just 1 second of Hemorrhage to monsters before and after. It is obviously a 71% increase because going from 1.75 to 3, that's the number. That's what 5/7 is or something like that. Anyway, Darius had about an 8.5% win rate, loss under baseline for Jungle Darius. 0.07% pick rate. No one was playing him. The buffs were clearly not enough. Jungle Darius, not very good. Fairly substantial buff to his clear speed. We'll see how it goes. Might see some follow-up changes. Who knows? Next up is Diana. Moonsilver Blades. Oh, look at the wording here. Damage. Damage bonus? Damage to non-epic monsters. I'm not sure why Diana needs specifically to not do bonus damage to Baron or Dragon. It doesn't really matter. Who cares? It's whatever. I assume it's to make mid Diana not just like even better at killing Baron and Dragon. I guess to be fair, like this is actually a pretty good tuning lever, right? Because like I think it's actually pretty reasonable. Because let's be clear, right? How often does regular Diana fight Krugs? I mean, occasionally, right? You can poach camps. Like, that's there. It matters. I mean, especially things like chickens, you might take a lot more. And in fact, this now means that there is an increasing set of, like, mid and top laners who, like, really actually want to go poach chickens because they're good at it. That can't be concerning. That can be, kind of a weird problem. But I think it's okay. I think this is actually still worth the design time and the, inconsistency, true inconsistency that would happen. Jungle Diana, by the way, also not doing very well. He's actually doing well in mid, by the way. He's like 2% over baseline in mid, and is a 10% win rate drop over her mid lane win rate to play jungle. I mean, it's the same as Darius, basically, but Diana's really not a good jungler. But anyway, it goes from doing 1.5x to doing 3x damage, so it's obviously this much damage here. Here's how much damage the passive itself deals, which is, basically this is how much AoE damage you're getting, right? This is how much you're, killing the small chickens and the small wolves and the small bits of Krugs. By the time you're level 3, if you're doing a blue start, you're level 3 by the time of Krugs, which means you will actually one-shot mini Krugs. If you're doing a red start first, 75, I believe, is, actually, your jungle item burn will kill him anyway, so actually, this saves like a full set of autos against finishing a Krug camp, which is pretty meaningful if your spells are down for whatever reason. But yeah, obviously, pretty meaningful damage difference. But, how about single target damage? Because obviously she has to attack one target. Well, actually pretty good still. Still, even at the very, very beginning of the game, when Moonsilver Blade's not doing much damage, it's still 15% increased damage, which is a pretty big deal. The final thing that's happening is, of course, the 10% attack speed become 20% attack speed at level 1, which triples, which means, 30 becomes 60 when you cast spells to auto-attack stuff. The, attack speed stuff doesn't matter a ton for mid lane. Once you're doing all-ins, it does, but, if you're all-inning at like level 6 or so, this is already scaled up a fair bit and is suddenly not as, meaningful. They could have done some like non-linear scaling stuff to like just flatten like 1 through 6 and then, go from there. That actually might have been the right choice. Just like make the first 5 levels of clear a bit nicer, but that like don't buff, mid Diana anymore. But ultimately mid Diana, who's already doing very well, is objectively stronger with this. Your last hitting gets better. Your, all-ins when fighting someone gets better. Mid Diana is going to be very, 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 very strong, and Jungle Diana is probably still going to be a bit too weak. Unlucky. Jungle Mordekaiser, however, is actually fine. Jungle Mord is, to be fair, I guess only 1% below baseline, which is completely reasonable. People play all kinds of champs that are 1% below baseline win rate, and they're very successful. So Jungle Mord is a very reasonable champion. But the monster cap on damage is getting heavily lifted, and even 18 is much higher as well. So here is, the sexy part of the data table, which is, a little bit unfair to be, I think, really clear. We'll see. What is this number? Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is, theoretically, your passive does 6 times or 5 times the damage in the early game. Is that realistic? Not really, no. But, that's, what the theoretical cap is. This one is how much health is actually required on the monster to cap the damage. Now, what's nice is this never actually, fell off too hard, but there is one asterisk here. So I talked about this in the previous video, where I wished that jungle monster damage just said, look, damage is capped at 4,000 health, or whatever, right? Pick a number, who cares? But to say, hey, damage against monsters is capped at 4,000 health. I think that would be a better solution for everyone at all times. Because one thing that happened, even with this elevated cap, is the AP ratio of Yorick, up on the passive is on flat damage. And much like Volibear 2 patches ago, the AP ratio is on flat damage, which means you could deal 164 base magic damage before % health damage, and the game would just bring your damage down. And look, that required 496 AP at level 18. But let's be clear, is 500 AP on Mordekaiser completely unrealistic? No, it's not. 500 AP on level 18 Mordekaiser is completely realistic. A full build Mord probably has about this much AP, especially if you're running something like Gathering Storm. Or you are able to build a Death Cap and build like that one squishy item. Elixir's Help, etc., Infernal Drake, things like that. It is realistic to see 500 AP on Mordekaiser. And his damage against things like Baron is artificially capped, right? Riot wants this as a mechanic to say, hey, look, we have % health damage, but, Champion's health is, like, really heavily constrained between, like, 500 at level 1 and, like, a full item Volibear has 4,000. And then, yeah, sure, Cho and Scion, go past that, but, like, every level 18 champion is between 2k and 4k. And that's, like, pretty constrained. And so, yeah, you know what? % health is an anti-tank mechanic. Tanks have twice as much health, 3 times as much health as squishies. So, yeah, this mechanic is 2 or 3 times good. But, jungle monsters are so tanky, we don't want to break that. We don't want to break the monster mechanic. We like it against champions, but we don't want to be broken against monsters. So, we're going to cap the damage. But designers just, like, pick a random number and go, and here's the cap. The cap is 112. Or the cap is 92, or whatever. And you run into problems when that happens, because sometimes the game betrays you and you're getting very, very little returns. Like, for example, Mordekaiser was capped at, to be fair, like, this cap is reasonable if Mordekaiser never built ability power. If Mordekaiser was a tank and he was balanced around hitting between 2,000 and 3,000 health champions, And so his jungle monster damage is capped at 2,000 to 3,000 health. I'm like, yeah, this completely lines up for a 0 AP champion. But I guarantee you in none of these cases is the cap raised based on your AP ratio. Because that is one other way to do it, right? Is raise the cap based on an AP ratio. So that, you know, the cap is 100 plus 0.3 AP. Like, that would make sense as well, sure. But that's not what's happening, right? There's no way that's what's happening. I guarantee you it's not what's happening. There's not a single time that's going on. So, like, that just feels bad. So, anyway, the new cap, yeah, it's virtually impossible to hit the cap early on, so you're not really getting the 6x damage. But, you know, whatever. It's still a clear speed increase. I want to point out a level, like, when Dragon spawns, when everyone's not even level 6 yet, excuse me, the first dragon of the game has 4,090 health. So, obviously, at all points in time, Mordekaiser's damage is getting capped against Dragon. Now it is basically always uncapped against Dragon until, you know, you're around here or something, and then you're hitting the cap again. But it's still 180 per second, which is, you know, still pretty good. But again, it means that you are not in any way rewarded for buying any ability power. So, things. And for reference, it's cut off on the screen here because it doesn't really matter. Here, we'll go over one. This is the AP amount to cap Mordekaiser's damage now. So, you know, up until level 18, you're not... I mean, even beforehand, you weren't really going to hit this cap until late game anyway. But you basically got, like 57 more ability power. Or 47? No, whatever. 53. 53 more AP, you know, can be bought before you just hard cap out on monsters. And you get literally 0% health damage. And then, by the way, any AP above 550, like, literally does nothing against jungle monsters. Which, again... to my chagrin. But Mordekaiser, who is already a reasonably successful jungler, should be completely viable and a totally worthy pick, considering he has the claw for some gank assist. Yeah, he runs kind of slow, but he's got decent clear speed, and he's got okay gank. And honestly, walking up and just ulting someone is a pretty good gank tool. Also, you just, you know... I guess if you ult, you're away from the dragon, so you can't ult in dragon fights reliably. I guess you could ult the enemy jungler and then, like, let your Callista rend or something. I don't know. Whatever. Who cares? Next up is Zed. Well, Zed's 6%, 6 to 10% max health magic damage and auto attack. No longer has a cooldown on minions or monsters, which means, by the way, this can help do things like last hitting melee and cannon minions, which I think is okay. Yep, it does buff Zed. He is stronger. He's better at last hitting now as a result, but not the end of the world. Damage no longer doubled against monsters, but there's no cooldown, so, you know, as long as you auto attack twice, it's at least as good. And the damage cap is getting changed. Now, there is something deceptive about these numbers, okay? 2, 350, 500 becomes 300. Doesn't this feel like a nerf to you? It feels like a nerf, right? What do you want to bet these numbers are? What level are these numbers? Obviously, this is 1. When does it become 350? And when does it become 500? Well, it becomes 350 at level 7. So 1 through 6, you objectively have a higher cap. At level 7, the cap is minus 50. The cap becomes 500 at level 17. Zed does not get his last bump in passive damage until level 17. It goes 1, 7, 1, 7. So you're not going to feel this in most games, especially not most jungle games. It's just not going to matter. So let's talk about what's really going on here. All right. Bam. Zed, epic monster damage. Okay. So again, here is the cap, right? It is 2 to 300. And yeah, so this is like straight up, this is the cap. This is the actual damage cap. I'm just double checking I didn't do anything weird. I thought I did something special here, but I guess I didn't. Okay, whatever. Yeah, fine. So, yep, the cap is obviously better here, and then, you know, it gets a bit worse. I might have overwritten one piece of data, but it's not relevant because, and I'll tell you about it in a second. Okay, so here is, by the way, though, right, here's how much health the monster had to have in order to cap the damage, right? So if, and then, you know, before and after, right? So what this means is, you know, if you're hitting a big chicken or whatever, you hit it once at, you know, 1670, you know, health, whatever, you did your 200 damage exactly once, and then you tried to auto-attack the camp the rest of the way down. Now, you know, assuming the health, how do I want to say this, right? It's like, As long as you auto it twice, this is always a buff at this point in time. Even if you weren't hitting the cap before. Because, you deal 190 damage, then you deal 95. You just deal 95 again, and hey, you're better. Obviously, in any other case where it's sufficiently tankier, you did 200 once, and now you do 300 multiple times, which is like, again, very obviously superior. It's very obviously quite awesome. It's good stuff. It's cool beans. We're about it. Sounds wonderful. Then at level 7 and all the way through level 16, you have this data table where, hey, if the monster could be hit, it could be hit for 350 almost, and if it had 21 87.5 health, I dealt the full 350, but I dealt the full 350 once, and now it's like, well, I mean, if it was under that cap, I just have to hit it twice, and that seems doable. And then I'm about as good. We're getting close anyway. Actually, yeah, it had about that much health. I just hit it once for 175, and then again for 175, and hey, look, we've caught back up. So even that was easy, right? But okay, if you are capping, if it had 4,000 health or whatever, it's like, well, okay, nothing with 4,000 health, am I one-shotting anyway? So what this basically means is, if I can try to describe it properly, I know I'm kind of rambling and kind of going around in circles a little bit, is anything with enough health that I'm hitting the damage cap anyway, I'm hitting more than once, which means it's always better. There's no way I'm bursting a random jungle monster for 2,000 health without using the passive, several times. And if the health is low enough, well, who cares? There can be a case that like a small chicken, taking double damage dies in one auto attack, and now it dies in two because you're not doing 12% of its max health and damage. Like that actually could have been a possibility. There can be breakpoints like that, but basically for anything large, it doesn't matter that the cap is like this, because there's really no way in the world you're not just doing way, way more damage. Right. So this is right. This is when it was capped, and this is just having twice the health. Okay. Whatever. Let's just move on. I guess the one thing I want to reiterate is the dragon, when it first spawns, has the one thing I didn't write down, and I think this is actually kind of useless data, but I was doing this late at night. These are the health totals to hit the new damage cap. So if your target has at least 5,000 health, you're doing 300 damage per auto. If it has at least 3,750 health, you're doing 3,000 damage per auto, and if it has at least 3,000 health at level 17 plus, you're doing 3,300 damage per auto. And this is at level, to be fair, this would be at level 17, right? We do like something like this, and then, hiya, cool. I'm not sure why I was doubling it. I'm not sure that's actually ever useful data. So I guess it's 11.8. Yeah, so there you go. There's these numbers. And realistically, the fact that in anything sufficiently large, and by the way, Rift Herald always spawns with more than 5,000 health. Baron always has more than 5,000 health. The only exception is Dragon, which spawns at 4090. But hey, let's be clear, 4090 times 0.06. Let's make it an actual number. Yeah, 245 damage per auto attack. That's just better, right? Like and then obviously, we have 300 per auto versus 350 once. Also, obviously, just better. So Zed is unquestionably better at killing jungle monsters, especially epic monsters, than before. Spent a lot of time in this one. I don't know. It was weird. It was weirdly convoluted. Probably didn't need to be. But Zed jungle is like absolute garbage, like a 12% win rate drop when you even play it. So he needs a lot of help. Oh yeah, it's also, and I forgot, it's capped only for epic monsters at all levels. So I'm trolling. I am trolling. Okay, we're back. This is why I kept the numbers, because I didn't read the rest of the patch notes, even though it's what I did. It's why I did the way I did the numbers. Okay. If your non-epic monster has this much health, you just objectively deal more damage. Basically. Because it's not capped, right? So I deal cap damage against this much health. If it has this much health, I deal the same damage, but every auto attack. It's only capped against epics. And I will say I'm a fan of that. I'm actually a fan of damage caps only being against epics. And it's interesting because I actually know for a fact, like, the same designer did all this work. I find it very interesting, and I'm not sure. I'd have to spend more time thinking about it, and he's almost certainly spent more time than I have on it, and he's also a professional game designer, and I'm not. That these are all different, right? This is, okay, damage to monsters. This is a flat amount. What are doing bonus damage monsters? This is bonus damage monsters, but only on epics. You know, Darius does, but Anna doesn't do bonus damage to Baron. And then Mordekaiser has a damage cap, but it's against all monsters. Zed has a damage cap, but it's only against epics. And I find that strange. I'm curious why this is. I think it's very interesting. Obviously, again, percent health mechanics aren't on all these kits, so, like, you know, it can't always be the same thing to the same thing, but I do find it odd. Or at least interesting that they're different. So we move on to Morgana now. Morgana, instead of 1.5x, does 2x damage to non-epic monsters. Once again, another one where it's bonus damage to non-epics, much like Diana, but not like Darius. And this is the minimum damage that W can deal. Jungle Morgana, of course, should max W first. It's a primary clearing tool. But W does more damage based on how injured the target is. So these numbers are actually always even better than they look, because this is as though the target's at full health the entire time, which is impossible. But the more damage your W deals, the lower health it is, which means the more damage your W deals. So it rapidly, ramps on itself, and that's really meaningful. So it's actually going to be, in all cases, a slightly higher than 33% damage increase, but pretty meaningful. Morgana jungle, not a horrible spot. Not quite as good as Mordekaiser, but not bad. Obviously, we saw CLG play it a game or two in the LCS, but about 2.5% win rate below baseline does need some help. And this certainly helps. I mean, clear speed's always a big deal, so should do a fair bit. I forgot to hide these. These are not actually getting changed. I just copy-pasted because they're templates. All right, so we now go into items. Basically trying to make Moonstone Renewer less absurdly picked up. Shirelia's more picked up. Staff of Flowing Water arguably less picked up. So, and I like the changes here in kind of all these cases. So Starlit Grace is now flat at 60. Instead of this increasing the heal up to 50%, it instead gives you global heal and shield power for all of your kit by up to 20%. So now Moonstone is less of a one-stop shop for healing, because the healing is basically always lower, but makes the healing you already have good. Now, this is interesting because this makes it much less poachable on things like Twitch, where, like, yeah, you can eventually get the Moonstone back to 100%, to 100 with, like, 4 other legendaries by increasing Starlight's Grace, but, you're missing out. Like, keep in mind, right, you're objectively losing this mythic passive ability haste, and just getting, like, maybe the healing's almost as good now because of my mythic passive, right? So you're just straight up losing this. If you're not already a healer, your 50% heal is becoming a 20% heal, so you're losing that as well. But if you are Janna, if you are Sona, if you are Seraphine, and you want to heal and shield people, well, those are stronger. And I totally am on board with that one. I think that's totally fine. I think there are other ways they could have done this change. I don't think they would be necessarily any better, but, like, the mythic passive could have been heal and shield power, for example. But, like, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. This could have been heal and shield power, and then this still could have been, the stacking amplification. And you would have still found ways to have your heal and shield power get, plus 20% or so, and still found ways to have the healing kind of scale over the course of time. But it's not relevant. Charlotte Gray's still finding some way to, like, scale based on level seems reasonable also, and again, it doesn't really matter. Overall, like, it's just, like, ways they could have done it that I don't think are necessarily any better. Overall, still feels like a pretty cool set of changes. So let's look at Moonstone for realsies once again. Here is the healing before and after. I'm assuming level 6 is the first possible baseline you can actually buy this item at. I guess it's actually weaker, of course, but the other thing worth noting is, of course, you can buff these numbers by getting legendaries. Once you finish your Spell Thieves all the way up to Shard of True Ice, well, now it's a 70 base heal. And honestly, by level 8, you probably have them all here by now. When's your next mythic come down? I don't know. Let's call it level 11. Who knows? Okay, well then, when's the last one come online? I don't know. I found this one. I got, it's like, turns out that if you can actually somehow buy things on pacing, it's like, oh, well, it's way less bad, right? If this is when you're getting, your Sightstone combine, and maybe it's earlier than this, right? But whatever, right? If this is when you're getting, your Staff of Flowing Water finally, if this is when you're getting Chemcheck Putrefire finally, and this is when you're getting your Wartstone at the very end of the game, like, yeah, this is kind of on pace, right? And we've ended up having kind of the same baseline healing. It is weaker. I think in almost all cases it is in fact weaker, but also keep in mind, right, that it is based on target's level. So when you're on, just, Frostfang and a Bandle Glass Mirror and my Moonstone Renewer, and I go and heal the Soul Lane Fiora, well, I'm getting 70 and she was going to get 88, right? So there are some pretty distinct differences here that are relevant. So it's definitely a nerf on the base heal. This is obviously a nerf on the base heal. This is literally just losing ability haste on the item overall. So Moonstone Renewer is definitively a lot weaker. There's no debate to this. Next up is Shurelya's Battle Song. No longer gives damage to the homies that you buff up. To be fair, I did feel like that was always a bit of a confused benefit. Instead, it is much more about going fast. So the Mythic passive is now inherited ability haste instead of the movement speed. I think that's fine, although I thought this did fit thematically pretty well. But empowering or protecting another ally champion grants both of you 25% move speed over 1.5 seconds. Now, this is a pretty big deal because it's getting it from Staff of Flowing Water. So what I actually like about this kind of a lot is, it's a much more exciting item because now much more of the item is in the passive benefits, which I think is a positive because you still control the passive benefits. I'm a fan of passives that you actually pay attention to and think about. So things like Grievous Wounds or Shield Busting or, Hex Drinker are good passives. For reference, I actually don't really like the Phage passive. It's just like, here's some regen and you can't really quantify it. Hope it's good. But like Shurelya's Battle Song feels good. Like, okay, sure, you are, to be fair, buying this item for two purposes, right? You're buying it for the active and you're buying it for the passive, but both of those are, here's some move speed, so are you really conflicted, right? Like if Moonstone Renewer had this line of text, I'd be pissed. Because this would be like, which one do I buy to go fast? And by the way, it's part of my Staff of Flowing Water, doesn't have this anymore. Hey, what's the better go fast item? Shurelya's active or Staff's passive? I don't know. Why not go Moonstone and Staff and get both? Oh yeah, it seems good. It's like, yeah, it turns out eating your own lunch is a bad idea. So I'm super glad about this touch-up, right? I'm identifying like, hey, this is a negative. Let's try to change things around a little bit. So Shurelya's Battle Song. Let's look at the before and after. Obviously, Moonstone Renewer, right? Here's the before and after. I like how I managed to type haste with a 5 there. But yeah, I don't know. The numbers aren't all that relevant. Obviously, again, you're basically just straight up losing a Mythic passive, and then Starlet's Grace is, worth considering. So here's Shurelya's Battle Song before and after. Obviously, again, the baseline stats are identical. Somehow I just don't have 8s here because of how I copy basic stuff. But so Inspire and a Mythic passive. We don't have that anymore. But we do have this 25% decaying movement speed, which is a very, very big deal. It's an extra line of text, and arguably, this is definitely up for debate, because move speed is a very good stat for supports. They need to get around the map and ward and then come back and do other stuff. But I think you can make that move speed back pretty easily by like buffing someone ever and getting some move speed out of it. And so, having a Nami run up and like go press E on Twitch, it's like now you have some really interesting decisions, right? Because on the one hand, you could have like the Moonstone Renewer play, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go debuff enemies and my teammates will receive benefits. And to be fair, we can talk about it in a second. There's maybe some negatives there, but it's like I'm going to go debuff my enemies and that's going to let my teammates receive benefits. And then conversely, you can say, well, I'm going to bring Shurelya's in. I'm going to buff my team and they will receive benefits. I'm going to give them this active. I'm going to give them this motivate passive. I will be willing to bet that it seems likely that the inspire active probably triggers motivate. And so everyone gets not only the base 60%, but also the 25% decaying on top. And Shurelya's is even faster. I don't see why that shouldn't happen. It should. So we'll see. The Mythic passive, again, I think debatably is actually stronger overall. So the one thing I'll say is like, hey, what if it's a negative is because I believe part of Imperial Mandate's benefit is the champion gains move speed when hitting the mandate target. And considering that Shurelya's has lost its damage benefit, so now only Mandate has a damage benefit, but now they both have the move speed benefit, one on Shurelya's, one on Mandate. I would like Mandate to be maybe less move speed focused, because that's Shurelya's thing. Like, Shurelya is definitely the move speed thing, right? Maybe Mandate like gets popped for a slow instead or something. I don't know, but especially when they're competing in the exact same space, like these are all enchanter mythics. I don't have a problem with the stat line being the same. I'm a fan of the stat line being the same. I'm a fan of this text ever overlapping. And in the case of Shurelya's Battle Song and Imperial Mandate, I believe they both give move speed to your friend on activation. Again, the if statements are different, but I don't like the then statements being similar. Anyway, Staff Flowing Water, instead of giving a movement speed, gives ability haste. The AP is the same. So here you go. It is not gold efficient until you get a buff on. Instead of move speed, you are getting some ability haste. Per gold, the ability haste is worth less gold. It is also, I suppose, possible to not use the ability haste because you might not cast the ability while buffed. But hey, 4 seconds is a pretty long time. Oh, and also I didn't realize it got buffed. So instead of being a move speed and AP for 3 seconds, it's ability haste and AP for 4 seconds. I'm a fan of that one as well. That's actually pretty meaningful. I dig that. I mean, this is objectively just, it's more ability power for longer. Like, you cannot permanently buff someone. Like, Sona's cooldowns aren't that short. Seraphine's shields aren't that short. The cooldown's not that short. So, like, you are going to be in situations where, like, they could have that extra 1 second of ability power and didn't. I think the ability haste is likely to be useful over the course of 4 seconds, so pretty big fan here. But it also means you really, really want to see if you can get Staff of Flowing Water like onto your Karthus right before they ult. Like, you're gonna have some like real incentives here to really tailor that ability haste. Then we have Frozen Heart, an item I still think is bad. Frozen Heart really does not need to have mana. I know we're just picking Glacial Shroud from before, but Glacial Shroud should just go away. It is not an interesting item. It is weird that the only way to get mana as a tank is to go into armor. So if you need mana to like wave clear against the mage poking you out, nope, you're not allowed. There's no way that's paired on purpose. Glacial Shrouds existed for like 11 years. Like, that item has not changed probably since 2010 in any meaningful way. And yet it's still building into items in 2021's item design, where they're like, okay, we're gonna rebuild every item, we're gonna like classify these items for all the classes, we're gonna include them all, and then we're just gonna keep Glacial Shroud. And it's like, you had one job, and that job was deleting Glacial Shroud from the game. I think Glacial Shroud is a garbage item. The other problem with Frozen Heart is that it is a tank item with no health on it. Tanks really need health, because you might want to counter build your opposing lane, but, I don't know if you've noticed, but like, a lot of tanks have abilities that scale off of health. Like, not as a shield. It's okay, it's the asterisk here. Scales off of health. Dr. Mundo's regen scales off of his health. Asterisk there as well, actually. It's, I don't know. Things like, actually, no, here's actually the good one. It's not called Bond of Stone anymore. It's the non-keystone Bond of Stone, where you slow an enemy, and so your opponents can, Font of Life. You hit them, you slow them, then your opponents get like % of your health as healing afterwards. Font of Life is like the cornerstone, like, supportive tank rune. And here's Frozen Heart, who doesn't scale it in any way. Oops. So yeah, I'm just not a fan of Frozen Heart until it has health and doesn't have mana. You can move the stats around, make it less efficient, whatever. Like, give it 50 armor and 200 health. Like, I don't care. Like, pick numbers. I don't, whatever. Pick numbers. But I think this item is trash until it has health, because you just really always want health. It's just a good stat, because you're going to build against Fiora, and then you go into a team fight, and then you just instantly die to LeBlanc, and you're like, wow, I'm sure glad I spent 25 gold on literally nothing. That feels good. Also considering that 400 mana is supposed to cost 560 gold, this item is nowhere close to gold efficient. Of course you are getting it for the the Winter's Cross ore and stuff. And most tank items, their like passes are so good that they're never gold efficient on the front loaded stats, but still just not a fan of this item. Chemtech Putrefier gets 5 more ability power, which is cool beans. Healing or shielding other allied champion, excluding yourself, empowers their and your damage with 60% grievous wounds. And then they're updating the tooltip, art, and sensor and stuff. Cool beans. Also, I'm really a big fan of grievous wounds now showing up in chat. That's pretty beautiful. I'm a huge fan of this. Great change there as well. So yeah, because basically you could run Ravenous Hunter and just... I'm brand with Ravenous Hunter. I always have 6% grievous wounds. It's pretty troll. That's definitely not what it was meant to do. So, that gets changed. So Putrefier now, when you heal someone else, now you both get it. So, for someone like, let's say, Sona, obviously you could just press W, and then she had the grievous wounds. If, you're a Sona or Seraphine in a team fight, everyone had it, and it didn't change anything. Now, if you're Sona or Seraphine in a team fight, still everyone has it. But the one difference now is if I'm Soraka and I W my teammate, or I'm Janna and I shield my teammate, now we both get it when only you would have gotten it before. So there are some benefits here. If you're running Aerie on Nami, you press E, you both get Putrefier. There are some objective wins there. It is obviously nerfed for the selfish case, but there are some objective wins in terms of it actually being better for the intended support case. 5 extra ability power. I mean, not bad, considering the fact that, by the way, this item is not gold efficient, and it has freaking mana regen as a stat. Unless I'm doing these numbers wrong, and I don't believe I am, Putrefier, unless I'm missing a stat here or missing a cost, and again, I don't think I am, you have never had to pay this much for Grievous Wounds before. Now, this Grievous Wounds trigger is very, very, very good, right? It is arguably the most reliable 60% Grievous Wounds in the game. So, a real consideration here, to be clear. But yeah, paying 400 gold for Grievous Wounds is out of line for most items of this class. Considering Mortal Reminder is 99% gold efficient. I think Merlinomicon is 95% gold efficient. Yeah, this is kind of strangely inefficient. I don't know. What's also of note, by the way, is I will say this very strongly. It should be on the enchanter to buy Putrefier. If there's an enchanter on your team, they should be buying Putrefier immediately after the mythic, or second after, or third as after one mythic, one legendary. It is a huge DPS loss to any mage or any marksman, and really even any fighter. Fighters are a bit closer. To take a sidestep to get Grievous Wounds. It is one thing that I find very interesting, because this should actually be pro play focused as well, because pros are good at optimizing. And there are lots of comps out there with healing in them. Mid Seraphine is totally in meta. Playing Karma, maybe it's Karma top, maybe it's Karma support. But and what's nice is the Seraphine mids do it. The Seraphine mids very often go Putrefier second or third item, usually after Flowing Water. In pro play, but play Sona or Seraphine or Karma or Nami or Janna support and buy Putrefier, because you can get at least one item on the line and get your team Grievous Wounds and not make your Sivir or Callisto or whatever have to stop by, and they won't anyway. But you still need the healing cut, and it's way easier to get healing cut as an enchanter than it is as a tank for support anyway. And finally, well, actually not finally, there's still more. 50 gold nerf to Ionian Boots of Lucidity. This item was definitely gigabusted. This item was far, 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 far too good. Now, even if you cost Summoner Spell Haste as 0 gold, the item was very, very gold efficient. Now, boots are supposed to be gold efficient. Berserker's Greaves are even more efficient than this is. Now, maybe with Summoner Haste actually being costed in any way at all, that's not true anymore. But it got to the point where the only way to really jungle, and yeah, it's a slight exaggeration, but not by much. The only way to really jungle was to do a 7 camp clear, which means get one of the scuttles and get your Krugs or whatever, and then recall at 900 gold, which is what a 7 camp clear gives you, and buy Boots of Lucidity. If you did a 6 camp clear, you didn't have 900 gold for Boots of Lucidity, and it felt really bad. You could, and I would do this, if you had to, sell the refillable potions so you could afford them. That was the only other option you really had. Otherwise, you had to do a 7 camp clear, and you realistically always bought Boots of Lucidity. With your Summoner Spell Haste, it meant that you could use your 4th and 5th smites a little bit sooner, and then get your 6th one up in time. So you had that going on. You obviously had the 12% haste on your flash that you had, about 30 seconds off your flash cooldown. I mean, that was pretty good. And honestly, it's just like, this is the best item in the game. Like, you just always buy this item. This item was giga busted. So now junglers, I believe, shouldn't be able to 7 camp clear recall get Ionian boots. They can 7 camp clear sell refillable get Ionian boots, which again I think is actually defensible. Or they have to stick around and figure out something to do. Maybe wait for chickens to come back or something. I don't know. There's even a chance that this actually changes like the jungle clear meta, because you're like, now we're gonna do chicken starts so that we can do chicken red Krugs or whatever. Or wolves blue gromp, whatever. I know it's kind of spaghetti pathing, but just starting with a small camp early on, so that your easiest camp is up as soon as possible, so you can do an 8th camp and then recall for Ionian boots. There is a chance that is the meta call at eventually, and people will try it out, and it might not work or whatever. But every jungler out there suddenly needs a new recall timing. That's a pretty big deal. This actually does have some meta implications as well, because if you weren't a good Ionian boots user, then your recall was like boots and a longsword, and you couldn't afford longsword dagger because that costs too much. That costs what boots cost now. So that wasn't a viable recall. So what would you even do if you're like Kindred? Double longsword? That feels horrible. Double longsword control wood's still worse than Ionian boots. So I'm glad that this is getting changed, because it actually shapes things up quite a bit. Next up, we have a nice change that I'm a fan of, which is Hextech Rocket Belt. We are again increasing consistency here. It now has a very similar base stat line to our good friend Luden's Echo with the 6 baseline magic pen. And Orin actually is going to give it an extra 4 magic pen on top, which is pretty exciting. But here is Rocket Belt before and after. It is losing 100 health, so the gold efficiency is not really changing, because 6 magic pen is costed at about the same as 100 health. Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, gold efficient item, has some flat pen, cool beans. And yeah, I'm a fan of this because the mythic passive is flat pen, so why not the rest of it? Now, I will say, I am not sure Rocket Belt should be the flat pen item. But I'm not sure which one it should be anyway. So to me, it's like Rocket Belt seems like the kind of item where the mythic passive would be percent move speed, because I want to run fast, and that sounds good. And Night Harvester is the one where, like, I just want to kill things as fast as possible, right? Like, you have Riftmaker, which is the tanky option. You have Rocket Belt, which is the go fast option. And you have Night Harvester, which is clear the highest damage option. And that's not the one with flat pen on it. Now, maybe that's too many good stats all at once, and it's just not okay. But, like, it's payment for hitting damage at some move speed. I don't know. It feels a little confused to me, but also I don't think items need to have only one point of differentiation, so it's not like the biggest thing ever. Whatever. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. We're already almost 2 hours into this video. This is a really freaking long one. I've had a lot of tangents. Anyway, I am glad to see this one get flat pen, though, because I think it's good to have a stronger flat pen option for non-mana mages. Next up, the Titanic Hydra is strictly nerfed, shifting its power away from early game and low health builds. So here's the Titanic Hydra before and after. 1% max HP, 2% bonus HP is the change. And I chose a level 9 average champion as our example. And a median level 9 champion has 1200 health. So I'm choosing 1700 health as our example target here. Well, 1% of 1700 health is 17. 17 AD multiplied out by its gold value is 600 gold worth of attack damage. And lo and behold, without counting the on-hit damage, Titanic Hydra was in fact not gold efficient by itself. But obviously, 30 on-hit damage is very, 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 very good. And 30 on-hit damage is, yeah. And then 91 AoE damage to the backline is also very, very, very good. And lo and behold, Titanic Hydra is in fact a great item. Well, 2% bonus HP means we're getting 2% of 500 health, which is 10 AD and not 17 AD, which is obviously less attack damage, less gold efficient, but these don't change because they are based on flat values plus max health, which means nothing else has changed here. Of note, though, anyone who is building... Okay, so this is obviously weaker for the ones who aren't building health items, right? It is objectively supposed to be weaker for Fiora, for first item Urgot, things like that. Of course. The intended crew are people who are building actual health builds, right? They're actually building Gore Drinker and Sterix Gauge and Black Cleaver and, Titanic Hydra and what's our last item? I don't know. Who cares? Kenpuk Chainsword, whatever. It doesn't actually matter what it is. Well, as it turns out, even for those champions, this is a nerf. Because for anyone who's going to be a health stacker, they're going to build. I mean, their baseline health is going to be over 2,000, just like automatically. There's like not a soul out there who's going to do this build. Like who Riot's even thinking about, and doesn't have more than 2,000 health. Well, Gore Drinker has 400 health, and Strikebreaker has like 200, 250. So there's 400. Black Cleaver is 400. Sterix has 400, so now we're at 1,200. This has 500, so now we're at 1,700. And at this point, we are boots plus 4 items, right? Right? We are Titanic, we are Gore Drinker, we are Cleaver, we are Sterix, we are boots, and we're level 18. We have 1,700 bonus health and, 3,800 total health because we have, 2,100 or so at level 18. Well, guess what? 2% of 17 is worse than 1% of 38. So even for the intended cast, they have nerfed Titanic Hydra. Now, that might be okay. Like, nerfing Titanic Hydra might be totally reasonable. But also, realistically, so much of what this item provides is actually not the 1% max HP to AD conversion. Like, at its worst, well, not really at its worst, but, like, kind of at its worst, you're losing 7 attack damage. I guess if you go all the way to level 18 and then still never buy any other bonus health, like you're doing, Blade of the Ruin King and, like, Bloodthirster and, Shield Bow and stuff, then you like never really have much bonus health. Okay, there's some on Shield Bow, I think, still, but okay, yeah, that actually continues on and is a further nerf, but like so much of what this item does is still front loaded on just what your max health is that I'm not sure this does enough. Again, it is a nerf, but like a lot of the item is unchanged. Some cool shop updates, which is great. Shreema Clash is coming, which is cool. Honor 5 Chromos, nice. ARAM balance changes. Bug fixes QOL. Alrighty. Well, yeah, we took a long time in this one. Probably longer than we needed to. I forget what all my tangents were, but oh well. Almost 2 hours in. TLDR, let's go. Okay. Annie, 20 mana cost, or 20 mana increase in the W until rank 5. Moderate nerf. Definitely an OP champion. Still going to be very, very strong. Aphelios, don't max E, it's trash. Bit of R damage, still going to be very bad in solo queue, don't play him. Cassiopeia, going to be in a very good spot with this mana cost buff. She seems great. Dr. Mundo, about a 40 to 60%, about a 40% regen increase overall with this change. Counting his base health regen. Pretty big nerf to jungle clear speed. Another moderate nerf to jungle clear speed. Bit more sustain overall. Probably still a slightly weak top laner. Probably still a reasonably good jungler. Gnar, bit less move speed on hyper in most leads of the game. Okay. LeBlanc, massive buff to Q 10 or 20 damage based if you double hit or not, is absolutely massive, and LeBlanc is OP and should be played. Nice buff to Lee Sin's clear speed, pretty nice. Definitely, I think, worth playing Lee Sin. Orianna is already bad in solo queue and is even weaker now. Might see her drop a bit out of pro play as a result, but yeah, definitely needs some pro play nerfs. Rammus is getting a new ultimate, and it's a really, really, really big deal. This is outstanding. This is awesome. It is a leap into Slam, and it's really awesomely wonderful, and this is a great change. Super, super big fan of this one. Also of note, defensive ball curl can now live like 3 to 4 seconds longer, which is a really, really big clear speed buff. Rammus should be in a very good spot post-patch, and probably free low. Rumble is getting really, really absurd amounts of melee auto attack damage when overheated. This is not only a strict buff per hit, but obviously 50% attack speed is a really big attack speed buff as well. And basically, you cannot brawl against overheated Rumble. If there's one thing you take away from this patch, do not brawl against the overheated Rumble. He will win. Harpoon gives you a 4 to like 20% damage increase based on game state. And he has less MR, so he can be killed by mages more easily. Thresh might consider Emax first or second a bit more often. Should still be fine. Vlad 1 second off late game Q. Mid game Q. Pretty reasonable. Yorick overall does less damage, not only with every ghoul attack, but with the charges as well. This is still more damage than the 11.6 Morning Mist ghoul damage. So still a buff to functional ghoul damage from 11.6, but definitely a nerf compared to 11.7. And then also the Maiden is now attacked after all the minions, which is a really big sieging buff. Yorick should be completely fine. Zac gets a very, very large damage increase. Flat 10 on the W is a really big deal for his early jungle clear. It's going to hasten him quite a lot. Also, the AP ratio buff is very meaningful as well. It should actually let you consider playing AP Zac. Darius was a trash jungler and is almost certainly still a trash jungler. And Diana was a trash jungler and is almost certainly still a trash jungler. Mordekaiser was a decent jungler and is actually very good now. Zed was a complete bag of garbage in the jungle and is probably still going to be quite bad. Although is receiving the largest buffs of anyone here. This is a very, very large buff to jungle clear speed, but it's probably still not very good. And then Morgana was an okay jungler and is buffed to be quite solid. So Morgana jungle is very much viable. Musa Manure is heavily, heavily, heavily nerfed. They basically deleted the mythic passive and just made it that Starlit Grace heals at all. Now it is an amp for all of your healing and not just Starlit Grace. So overall, Musa Manure itself heals for much less. You have less ability haste, but you have some heal and shield power, so it's going to be poached less by non-enchanters. Shirelli no longer gives bonus damage, but instead gives way more move speed, because every buff gives a passive move speed buff. And him ability haste for the mythic passive seems fine. Staff Flowing Water no longer gives move speed, but gives haste instead, and the buff is a little bit longer. I think all the changes are cool changes. This is a pretty big nerf to Moonstone, and what I think is a pretty big buff to Shirelius. Frozen Heart gets 10 more armor and is still trash. Can't take Putrefier, gets 5 more AP. Does not self-stack off of being Vladimir. Not that you would do it here. Or having Ravenous Hunter. Good change. Still, I mean, it's funny. Like, the item is like kind of weak, but it's also optimal on enchanters, so you're just buying it anyway. Boost Lucidity, nerfed by 50 gold. Very, very big deal. This can do a lot, shake up how jungle's going, because the common jungle play is 7 camp clear recall by Ionian Boots. You can no longer afford them without selling your refillable. This matters. Hextech Rocket Belt. 100 less health, 6 more Magic Pen. Big buff. Thinnic Hydra is definitely weaker for people who don't build more health, and is also objectively weaker for people who even do build more health. So Thinnic Hydra is just a weaker item, but it's more weaker for the, Shield Bow Titanic crew. And that's it. That's the patch rundown. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you watched all 2 hours, what are you doing with your life? I appreciate you very much. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.